They found him slumped over his desk, cold coffee in one hand, an old case file in the other. Retired Detective Harold Langston had been dead for hours, but what truly disturbed investigators was a message scrawled on the final page of the file. He was never the first. Before we dive into this gripping story, let us know where you are watching from today. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Harold Langston was a legend in the city of Fairview. Over a 35-year career, he solved some of the most brutal crimes the city had ever seen. Colleagues called him relentless. Victims' families called him a hero. But there was one case that haunted him even into retirement. A case that went unsolved for over a decade. It was known as the Whitmore Woods murder. The year was 2012. A young woman named Clara Jennings, a college student, was found deep in the woods just outside town. Her body was staged, her hands placed over her chest, her eyes wide open, and a single white lily tucked beneath her fingers. No DNA, no witnesses, and no apparent motive. The scene was eerie, almost ceremonial. Harold, who was lead detective on the case, spent months chasing every lead, but they all ended the same way: dead. Eventually, the case went cold. Officially, unofficially, Harold never let it go. After his retirement in 2021, Harold would often be seen walking the trails near Whitmore Woods, scribbling in a weathered leather notebook. Neighbors said he grew more withdrawn, obsessive. Some even claimed they saw him talking to someone in the woods, someone who wasn't there. When he was found dead in his apartment last Tuesday, it looked like natural causes. He was 68 with a bad heart. But what didn't make sense was what he'd been working on just before he died. On his desk sat Clara Jennings' case file, open to the crime scene photos. Scribbled across one of the pages was a phrase in red ink: he was never the first. Detectives didn't know what to make of it until they flipped the page and found a hand-drawn map. It wasn't the original crime scene, but a completely different section of the woods with an X marked in bold. The next morning, 2 officers followed the map. What they found, buried 6 feet down, was another body, a second victim, unknown, undiscovered for over a decade, and staged exactly the same way as Clara. Hands crossed, eyes open, white lily in hand. But this time, they found something else. A locket around the woman's neck with initials engraved on it. And those initials match a name from a missing persons report filed in 2008, 4 years before Clara was killed. Suddenly, Harold's final message made sense. Clara wasn't the first. Back at the station, detectives began cross-referencing cold cases and missing women from surrounding counties. Within hours, 3 more reports popped up. Women who vanished without a trace, years apart, all last seen near wooded areas, all with eerily similar profiles. But then came the real twist. As they dug deeper into Harold's notes, they discovered something buried in the margins of his journal. A name, one that hadn't come up in any official investigation. One that seemed to be underlined over and over again. A name that sent chills down the spine of the detective now leading the case. It was the name of another officer. And not just any officer. It was someone still on the force. He had spent a decade chasing a ghost. But what if the killer was never hiding? What if he'd been standing right beside him all along? The name scribbled in Detective Harold Langston's journal, circled, underlined, and repeated, was Officer Ryan Mercer. On the surface, Mercer was everything a small-town police department could ask for. Clean record, commendations, a dedicated beat cop who joined the force in 2007, just a year before the earliest known victim disappeared. But Harold's private notes told a different story. He had kept tabs on Mercer for years, documenting unusual behavior, patrol logs that didn't add up, nights spent near Whitmore Woods without official explanation, even an anonymous tip Harold had received in 2015 claiming Mercer knew more about the woods than he let on. Harold never submitted these suspicions to the department. Why? Maybe he had no hard evidence. Or maybe he didn't trust anyone else. Back at the station, the new lead detective on the reopened case, Sergeant Lila Monroe, began quietly looking into Officer Mercer. Without tipping him off, she started with his old shift logs. Most of them were routine, but one detail stood out. On each date close to the victim's last known sightings, Mercer had reported patrolling in areas suspiciously close to where the bodies were eventually found. Not near, directly adjacent. That could have been dismissed as coincidence, if not for what came next. Lila pulled the archived dashcam footage from Mercer's patrol car the night Clara Jennings disappeared. The timestamp read 10:48 p.m. He was logged as patrolling Main Street, but the footage showed trees. Deep woods. The location data confirmed it. Whitmore Woods. There was no legitimate reason for him to be there. And worse, exactly 12 minutes later, his camera cut out. When it resumed again, 37 minutes had passed, and Mercer was parked in a completely different area of town. When Lila brought this information to the chief, he dismissed it. Harold was a good man, he said, but he was obsessed. Don't let his paranoia turn into a witch hunt. Still, Lila couldn't let it go. Something about Mercer didn't sit right. And as she began retracing Harold's investigation, she noticed something else. Harold had circled dates in his notebook, 5 of them, spaced almost exactly 3 years apart. Clara Jennings had been the most recent, the body found after Harold's death, another. The others, all missing women, spaced out like a grim pattern. But here's the chilling part. The next date circled in Harold's journal? 2 weeks from now. Was Harold predicting another murder? Or was he trying to stop one? That night, Lila drove to Whitmore Woods, retracing Harold's map by flashlight. Deep in the woods, just past a second stream marked in his notes, she found something. Not a body, not a weapon, but something worse. A freshly dug hole. Next to it, a white lily. And beneath the dirt was a plastic bag containing photos. Photos of the victims, alive, smiling, taken candidly. But one photo sat on top of the stack. It was taken just 2 days ago. It was a photo of Lila. She found a photo of herself buried where the victims once lay. Now she knows. She's not the one solving the case. She's the next one on the list. Lila's breath caught in her throat as she stared at the photograph. It was a shot of her at the local diner, coffee in hand, looking out the window, unaware she was being watched. Her fingers trembled as she pulled more photos from the bag. Dozens of women, some identified victims. Others, not in any official database. She wasn't just dealing with a killer. This was someone who had been stalking these women for years. And Harold had gotten close. Too close. She stuffed the bag into her coat and got out of the woods. Whatever was going on, she couldn't trust anyone. Not her department, not the chief, and definitely not Officer Mercer. That night, she broke into Mercer's locker. It looked empty at first, but behind the false panel at the back, she found a hidden thumb drive and a folded piece of paper. On it, scrawled in Harold handwriting, "You were right. It's not over. If I don't make it, look inside." The thumb drive contained footage Harold had secretly recorded from a hidden trail cam deep in Whitmore Woods, motion triggered and time-stamped. It showed a figure, face mostly obscured, dragging something heavy through the trees at 2:13 a.m. the night before Harold died. Same build as Mercer, same boots, same limp. The last frame of the footage, the man looking directly into the camera and smiling. Lila's mind raced. She needed to confront Mercer. But carefully, she arranged for a meeting at the diner during shift change when she could be seen and heard by plenty of witnesses. But Mercer didn't show. Instead, she received a text from an unknown number. "You should have left it alone." She barely had time to move before she heard the crash. Back at her apartment. Smoke, sirens, flames lighting up the night sky. Her place gone. Everything Harold had collected, everything she'd found, destroyed, except for one thing. The drive she had emailed to herself earlier that day. And now, she knew what she had to do. She couldn't go to the police. She couldn't trust the system Harold once believed in. But there was one place she could go. Harold's sister, Maggie. Maggie had stayed quiet throughout the investigation, but she had worked in digital forensics for the state for nearly a decade. When Lila arrived at her home, she was already waiting. Harold must have warned her before the end. Together, They reviewed the footage, the files, the patterns. Mercer wasn't acting alone. There were signs, paperwork signed off by Chief Warren, patrol logs manipulated by a second officer, and surveillance camera blind spots programmed by someone on the inside. This wasn't just a lone predator. It was a cover-up, an entire network. And Harold's death? It wasn't a suicide. It was a warning. Lila turned to Maggie. We need to get this to someone outside the state. A journalist. Federal, anyone. Maggie nodded, but her face had gone pale. There's something else, she said quietly. A file Harold never wanted anyone to see. I cracked an hour ago. She slid the laptop toward Lila. There was one last photo, one final name. A woman, early 30s, blonde, eyes bright with familiar intelligence. Lila stared at the name. Claire Monroe, her sister, dead 10 years ago. Or so she thought, because the timestamp on the photo? Yesterday.